Anjali Arora is the head of private equity and investment funds at Denton, South Africa. She has quickly built a market leading private equity practice differentiated by its focus on creating a positive social and economic impact, a concept she calls impact lawyering. Tanya van Lille is the CEO of the Southern Africa Venture Capital Association. As a strategic and creative thinker, Tanya's interests lie in both human and organizational development, with the aim of shaping the ongoing growth and success of South Africa's private equity and venture capital sector. Abby Mustafa Madukor is the CEO at African Private Equity and Venture Capital Association. Before this, she held leadership roles at AVCA as Chief Operating Officer and as the Special Advisor to the Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment in Nigeria, where she focused on programs and policies to spur private sector investment and SME growth. Langa Madonko is the co-founder of Summit Africa, a niche alternative investment manager. He is also a member of the investment committee of FireFem Fund Managers, a private equity fund focused on gender lens investing and empowering women's shareholding. The moderator is CNBC Africa anchor Fifi Peters.
Right, it is great to be back with you guys once again as we head towards the finish line of today's program. And we've met the speakers that we will be speaking to in just a short while. In fact, I'd like to extend my good afternoon to them all and wish them a happy International Women's Day. And Langa, I hope you have had a great day. Nonetheless, let us proceed with the discussion, because looking at this panel, it's very hard to believe that y'all have it so tough, given that I'm speaking to women who occupy the top positions in private equity in the continent. But of course, we are probably looking at the outcome and the product of a lot of blood, sweat and tears that you guys had to put through to get to where you are today. So perhaps, Tanya, let us begin with you with a history lesson. Look back at how it is you came to the spot that you are in right now.
Hi, everyone. It's wonderful to be here. And it's difficult to follow up this panel with so many wonderful speakers that we've already seen today. But in terms of my journey, always been about the opportunities themselves, never looked at gender as an inhibitor. It might be the way that I was, that I grew up or just my mindset. But it was always just about grabbing those opportunities and saying yes to what was offered, and never really looked at it from a gender perspective, but more about, is this something that will stretch me? Is this something that will make me uncomfortable, where I can learn and grow? And if so, let me try this particular role. And private equity definitely, as an industry, is not for the faint-hearted. It is a tough industry to get into, but there are opportunities for a lot of the women who really want to get into this particular industry.
Great to hear. And Abby, coming to you, congratulations on your recent appointment to the role, and especially as a Black female executive who some say have it a lot harder, because we are battling two barriers, that on racial lines and also on gender lines. But talk to us about your journey, Abby.
Thank you so much, Fifi, and hello, everyone. It's great to be here. So, yeah, my journey has had peaks and troughs, and I do agree with you. Being a Black woman, you are at the intersection of race and gender, and it can be difficult. But I started my journey in chemical engineering, again, a very male-dominated field, and then I transitioned to financial services. And I guess throughout my career, what I was almost searching for was just looking for representation. And it was really difficult, if I'm being quite candid, in UK financial services. You know, when I looked up and I was trying to map my pathway to progression, I couldn't really see people that looked like me. And I think that was the pivoting point for me, where I just decided I wanted to be a role model. I wanted to get into leadership. And from that point on, I just became really intentional about mapping out where I wanted to be, and then just being focused on taking opportunities that closed the delta between where I was and where I wanted to be. And in all of that, there were a lot of mistakes, trial and error. I had some time where I thought I could be an entrepreneur. I respect entrepreneurs. It's very hard. And that didn't go well. So I've had a really colored set of experiences. But if I could close with, it's just one thing that I have done is I haven't been scared to take up space in a male-dominated world. The title of this panel in a man's world. I don't think it's a man's world. I think it's a gender balanced world. And somebody said to me, if you don't get a seat at the table, bring your own table and your own chair. So that's what I'll leave you with.
Yeah, no, lovely analogy. But apparently, the private equity industry has got it a lot tougher than other industries in terms of that gap between pay and equality of opportunity. And perhaps, Anjali, you can come in here. Coming from a single-parent household, being raised by your mom, and you went on to go study at some of the best institutions in the world and also occupy really prominent positions at a very young age. But I imagine it wasn't all easy. So talk to us about the factors and the tools that you used to continue your journey to the top.
I think I said to someone that it's a little bit like being a singer. When you go on stage and you're a singer, you just sing and you forget about everyone else in the room and you forget about everything else. And that's the same for me. In my journey, when I'm there in the legal room, faced lots of the times, meeting rooms, I'm the only female in that room. But you forget about all of that and you just do what you're meant to be doing at that time in that place. It really is about just kind of getting into your zone. And I think, we can't put off by what's going on in the world and, what opportunities are there or not there. You've got to create your own opportunities. Very much is about that for me. I have lived all around the world, Europe, Hong Kong, South Africa. I've seen different attitudes towards women. And I've seen different coping mechanisms, but all of them go to sisterhood as well. We together as a group, women need to stick together. We need to create opportunities for each other as well. So that's been, I think, very important. And I think that journey has become more and more pronounced over time. Back in the day, when I was the youngest partner at a law firm, there were only a few female partners at law firms at that time. But, now there are more females in decision-making roles, and we have to kind of really open the doors for the next generation.
Mm-hmm. Certainly. And Olanga, thank you so much for being the balance in this equation. There's a reason why you're here. Obviously, you are a well-respected voice in the private equity space here in South Africa, and we want to find out from you. I mean, of the many hats that you wear in the industry, one of them being, I believe, co-chair of the transformation committee there at SAVCA. Can you talk to us about what some of your male counterparts in the industry are saying about, closing the gender parity gap in your space, and perhaps about why things have progressed so slowly?
I think, thank you for the question and thank you for having me on the panel. I think the conversations are starting to focus more on issues of diversity and transformation. I think historically, yes, private equity was somewhat of a boys' club, but I think more and more of the people who are in the private equity space are aware of the value and are aware of the critical role that women play, not only in private equity, but in the economy as a whole. And I think more and more conversations are moving towards issues of saying, look, we've been having these conversations where we've spoken about different issues of equality, whether it was first race. Unfortunately, now the last one is gender. And I think we are seeing it from whether it's in our own homes as men being raised by strong women, or as men who've worked in particular sectors and have been led by strong, successful, intelligent and ambitious women. And we now see more than ever, more men taking a role of wanting to be advocates for saying, hey, look, that's unfair. In many instances, they're speaking up and making the case as well to say, this is my contemporary, and actually in some instances, this is my better. I have the pleasure of consistently working with Tanya at SAVCA and a very much strong female team. And each time with the ingenuity and with the levels that they're able to lift the organization, we're always consistently having reaffirmation of the good work that women can do. And I think everybody's starting to see that. And I think just to close, I can say, women are refusing to be ignored, and we are happy to stand behind them and shout and say, Velo, you shouldn't ignore them.
Certainly, and it seems like the coherent message that I have heard from the ladies, Tanya, kicking off with kicking off with you when you spoke about, not letting barriers around gender get in your way. Also, when it came to Abby, when you said that being intentional about what you want and going for it. And then Angelique saying that, going for each and every opportunity and doing what needs to be done. But as we talk about COVID-19 and the impact that it has had on the economies and the impact that it has had in your space specifically, we know that that impact has been disproportionately weighed on women. And Tanya, I'd like to understand exactly how the industry is responding to this. And more particularly in terms of the support that perhaps general partners are giving to their portfolio companies, particularly those that are women-led.
So, Phoebe, there's been a lot of support and more active management by the industry than ever before as a result of COVID. Private equity has always brought to the table not just capital, but strategic know-how, guidance, and opening doors and networks. But as a result of COVID, they had to be a lot more hands-on in terms of supporting their portfolio companies. So these are the companies that they've invested in, the investee companies, for those that aren't too familiar with how private equity works. But what private equity had to do as a result of COVID was to really help ensure that these companies had working capital to see the crisis through. Because depending on which industry they were in, they really had to ensure that they had the working capital to save as many jobs as possible, to ensure that they can pay their suppliers, etc. But then also renegotiating contracts, either with landlords or with suppliers, etc. But it was really about, firstly, ensuring that all the staff are, that the potential health risks are looked after. And secondly, it was to look at the economic viability of these companies. And for the women-owned businesses, from a financial perspective, it was very similar to male-owned businesses. I think the thing is that we don't see enough investment going into women-owned businesses. But even these women-owned businesses, because of the balance that they needed to, and a lot of the panel spoke about it earlier today, about being a woman and all the other challenges that you face at home and the different roles that we have to play, that there needed to be a lot of flexibility and additional support that private equity fund managers had to provide these women. But I think we need to start with pre-COVID, and even now, first question is, are we investing in enough women-owned businesses?
Okay, I'm going to come back to you for that answer. But Abby, to get your view from the continent in terms of how the industry was supported throughout COVID-19, particularly women-owned businesses that were more impacted by the virus and had to take on a lot more than their male counterparts.
Yeah, I fully agree with Tanya, with everything Tanya said. I think it was a really tough year for the private equity industry and for the investee companies for all of the reasons, that we all know and that Tanya has said. I think one of the positive consequences, this is the fact that the private equity industry is hands-on anyway. Like Tanya said, they offer more than just capital, but more so hands-on management. So it wasn't a shock to the investee companies when they had to dial this up around COVID. So I think that was positive. What's also interesting is that we've started seeing from a strategic perspective, kind of fund managers raising funds that are targeted at kind of economic recovery by supporting businesses affected by COVID. And, in South Africa, we've seen the example with 91 and Ethos raising a $600 million South Africa recovery fund. And then when we're looking more at some sectors, again, in the hospitality sector, this has been a sector that's probably been the most significantly affected by COVID. And if you think about the percentage of women that work in the hospitality sector, it's quite a high percentage. And what we've seen in this sector is we've seen, for instance, Casada Hospitality Fund, they acquired Accor Hotels, which is a hotel chain, and they acquired 8 of their hotels, obviously because the sector has been, particularly badly hit by COVID. And this acquisition, I think, is quite positive for the industry. And it's really showing how private equity fund managers are, really trying to address some of the fallout from COVID-19 and then trying to add value in some of the investee companies. So I guess to summarize it, it's been a hard year, hopeful, crossing fingers that things get easy. I think private equity fund managers have rolled their sleeves up and they've been really intentional about supporting all their portfolio companies. And this is male-led and also female-led portfolio companies as well.
This is fantastic to hear. And just to expand on your point about the role of private equity in, a lot of the reconstruction plans that we have on the continent's table. And if I can just ask maybe Anjali to take this further, because right now I think private equity is more crucial than ever in funding these plans to emerge economies from the crisis and to help them build back better. The question that Tanya had asked in terms of, are we investing enough in female owned businesses? I'm just wondering, as we do try to build back better and we do try to attract capital to projects that will have a greater social impact and, of course, investment returns in the long run, how do we ensure that we do get more women owned businesses on the radar in your view?
So I think to the question of are we doing enough? Well, if we look at the percentages, I think there's about 58% of businesses in Africa are women-led, women-owned. Yet only 7% of those receive PE funding. So the stats kind of speak for themselves. So what are the solutions, as you say, Fifi? How can we address this problem? I think we have to look at the three levels in the private equity ecosystem. There's the investors that pour money into the private equity firms. They need to stand up and say, look, firms, we're only going to invest in you if you've got a nice gender balanced board investment committee yourself. Then when they've applied that pressure to the PE firms need to put in place decent strategies and policies which attract and retain female talent and put them in the decision-making roles. Right now, again, I read somewhere that a vast majority of PE firms don't even have maternity policies. I think 50% don't even have paternity policies. So, people really need to think hard about how they're constructing the PE firms themselves. Then, once you've got a nice gender balanced board at your private equity firm, I think you're going to find that they're far more likely to invest in female-led, female-owned portfolio companies. Because again, stats show that where you've got a balanced board, they are more likely, I think twice as likely to invest in female-owned businesses, because you're getting through some of the unconscious biases that are in play when you've got a male-dominated board that invests, in people that they know, people that they see that are like them. So I think the solution comes at the three different levels.
Great solutions. And Langa, I'm wondering what you think about the proposals. I mean, easier said than done, or as easy as is said and as is done, I think the saying goes.
So I think from speaking from our experience at Summit Africa, one of the things that I've seen is the talent to achieve those type of statistics exists. There's an immense amount of talent that exists that can occupy the board seats, that can occupy the investment committees. And I think we're also starting to see, even from our own investor base, the requirement that we take into account issues of diversity, inclusivity. We're starting to get a lot more of our investors asking questions around what the pay scales look like. We're also getting questions around how we're creating cultures of inclusivity, dealing with issues of conscious and unconscious bias within the entities to make sure that we get there. But I think if the private equity managers take a view and take a position to say, we are particularly going to look to achieve pay parity, we're going to achieve greater involvement of women in decision-making roles, and actually set it out within their company philosophy and culture, and set those goals in writing and work towards them. In some instances where you say there is no talent, maybe the talent requires you to train them and to build them up into those roles that you require them to be. Maybe if you're saying that you can't find them, then maybe it's about broadening the circles and the spaces in which you are actually actively looking. And I think the talent exists. Achieving those numbers is quite easy, in my view. And I think it's just about your own conscious intent to achieve it. I think in our firm, we are currently at least 50% female. Our board is majority female. Our investment committee was predominantly male, but we are taking active and conscious steps to also bring it to a point where we are at least 50% female. We also do this with our investment, with our investee companies. as well, to say that's the transformation and inclusivity targets that we want them to reach.
Because just going back to what the panel did raise around the recovery plans, right now for many parts of the world, I mean, infrastructure investments and increased investments in the space is at the center of a lot of these plans. And while, you know, infrastructure is traditionally a man's world, what isn't, there are female construction workers and female engineers and female miners or mining experts. So, Tanya, with the expected uptick in private equity that is on the cards for 2021, to your question again, how do we ensure that a lot of the female-led businesses within this space attract that capital?
As Angelique said, that the changes need to happen at the three layers within the private equity space. But what we've seen, and South Africa runs a fund manager development program for emerging fund managers that require a little bit of support and encouragement, mentorship as they start their own funds. But what we're seeing is that the investment mandate of these new fund managers that are coming to the floor, and a lot of these emerging fund managers are really strong women deal makers and investment professionals that are starting their own funds, do have an infrastructure mandate. And for a lot of them, they've got the experience and the deal expertise to go out and invest in these infrastructure assets, whether it is renewable energy, whether it's student accommodation. We're seeing a lot more women as investors in the industry. But as Anjali said, we need to make sure that the actual institutional investors, or the limited partners as they are called, ensure that their mandate include women-owned fund managers in their mandate, who then in return invest in women-owned businesses. And I think we will see this trickle through the value chain, but that's how we're going to see more investment going into these kinds of businesses. But it's also important, as Langa said, that those talent, those projects, those companies that can benefit from more infrastructure investment, those portfolio companies are out there, and it's about who is making the deal decisions. Are they diverse? And do they think about women businesses as they make these deals? So it's important to have a diverse fund mandate, but also the deal team itself, who are making these investments, need to be diverse and think about more gender balanced investing, whether it's infrastructure or any other kind of industry.
And Abby, as you mentioned a little earlier, you were speaking about the hospitality industry, which is amongst the hottest hits. Beauty, fashion, lifestyle industries in which you have a lot of female players traditionally in the space. And while you did mention you did make reference to one of the latest developments by way of a fund being set up, I'm just wondering to what degree the industry is thinking and seeing this area as a potential growth area once we're all vaccinated and once we can all get back to business unusual in the new world, as it were. I mean, is the PE space seeing a lot more opportunity within the sector, and by virtue support for the mainly females in the sector, which would have a knock-on effect on the broader communities and of course society at large?
Yeah, so if you had asked me this question, say, a couple of years ago, I would have said, oh, these are kind of one-woman businesses. There's no growth potential in these businesses. And there's a limit to how much these businesses will grow. But I think our new normal, whatever that looks like, anything is possible. What we've been seeing is obviously the traditional sectors where we see growth in PE are, consumer staples, financials, industrials. We know these sectors, and we've been seeing that over the past few years. And then when we look in the VC space, they're mostly tech-enabled investments. Having said that, though, just to echo what Anjali had said, I think to her second point about the second layer, about how fund managers need to be more gender balanced, we are seeing more fund managers like Summit Africa that focus on investing in women-led businesses. So we have the likes of Arua Capital, Alithia Identity Fund, Django. There are quite a few of them. And I think these are the fund managers that will understand how to find opportunities in these sectors that you mentioned, Fifi. Because traditionally, I wouldn't expect a and this might be bias on my part, but I wouldn't expect a non-gender biased fund management team to potentially have the networks to source some of these businesses, right? But I think for the fund managers that are focused on investing in female-led opportunities and in women empowerment, I think these are the sort of sectors that are going to start coming up. This is my view with no data to back it up. I just think given the trends and where we're seeing the industry going, I suspect that in the next few years, we will see a lot more activity in this space.
We can only hope. But as we head to wrapping up this discussion, Langa, I mean, I suppose that changing mandates, right, investment mandates is perhaps not as complex as changing constitution. I mean, I stand to be corrected. But nonetheless, it is something that I suppose will take time to implement, and also will take time to get stakeholder buy-in. I'm just wondering, in the interim, you know, as we wrap up this discussion, your message to female-led organizations, perhaps looking and wanting to be a lot more visible in terms of accessing capital in this time. How do they do that?
I think in terms of how do you become more visible, I think it is having a good story, and it is about finding the opportunities to present yourself to the investors. I think a big part of it is also then, don't be naive and think the entire investment pool is looking at investing in what you have to offer. I think in many instances, we find that from a capital raising perspective, understanding the profile of the investor and what they're looking at and what themes they think are critical for investment helps you get a lot further. I think also the narrative has always been there that empowering women has a greater economic impact in terms of the social upliftment, as well as how far each dollar invested impacts the local community. And I think those are some of the salient stories that need to support part of the drives to go into those spaces. And I think it has to go beyond just having, shall we call it, a women-led team. And I think it has to go also to speaking to the underlying fundamentals of how we are also going to empower the businesses that you're going to invest in, how you're going to take advantage of ecosystems that exist, how you're going to take advantage of new opportunities such as the Africa Free Trade area. It also goes, I think, lastly, to not creating a situation whereby we are trying to undo one form of a boys' club by then creating a girls' club. I think it's also important to continue to remember that diversity means all of us working together to achieve the common good. I think that's my summation of it.
I couldn't agree more. Although girls' clubs can be fun, but I couldn't agree more with the point that you're making in the fact that, you know, both parties are required there at the table. Tanya, just a message from you regarding visibility, and especially as, you know, I imagine it has been hard for you guys to do your proper due diligence on the ground virtually. I do believe that things are changing, but you know, that depends rather on this vaccination program and how successfully we conducted. So just a message on visibility and getting a lot more attention from the industry as a female-led organization.
I think do your homework, understand who's investing in what, and those that you approach them with confidence and conviction. A lot of times as women, we are our own worst critic. We either stand on the sidelines, not taking center stage. I don't know what we're afraid of or why we do that or why we critique ourselves so much, but we have a lot to be proud of, and really own that space, but do your homework. Don't just approach Alanga from Summit Africa because you've seen him on a panel here and think he's going to invest in you. Understand what his investment mandate is about. Look at the other companies that he's invested in. And once you've done your homework and you can really articulate what your value proposition is, it goes a long way with these investors when you do approach them. But Langa can vouch for that.
I'm sure he can, but Abby, passing words from you, and also, you know, as you reflect, what you're hoping to achieve within your role, not only in ensuring that more money is channeled towards women organizations, but in also ensuring that more women can one day sit in the seat that you're sitting in today.
So that is the hope, that more women can occupy this position after me. In terms of what we are trying to achieve as AVCO, it's really simple. We're trying to be the conduit of all stakeholders that are currently engaged in or interested in investing in private investment. So the reason why we exist is to guide more private investment onto the continent, and that's what we want to continue to do. From a female-led organization perspective, very similar to what Tanya said, I think the time is now. So I think success is as we all know, is a good mixture of opportunity and preparedness. So I think my parting words to female entrepreneurs is be prepared, understand your value proposition, do your market research. So this is more for the early stage founders. Do your market research, understand what problem you're trying to solve and be able to articulate it. And some advice that somebody gave me ages ago, which is so relevant, is have your elevator pitch ready. You never know when you'll be in an elevator with Langer and you've got 3 minutes to tell him why he should he should invest in you. So have your elevator pitch ready. And like Tanya said, just be confident. We spend so much time as women being overcome by imposter syndrome and not fully, leaning into our abilities, into all the things that make us that have attributed us to where we are now. So self-belief, self-confidence, preparedness, and just being very, very intentional about taking up any opportunity that comes your way.
All right. Thank you. And Anjali, final words from you. I know you're very passionate about impact lawyering. So just talk to us exactly about how that will help address some of the gender inequality issues that we are experiencing, or that you have experienced in your space.
So I think that, we've built a really good ecosystem for portfolio companies, women-led portfolio companies. I think accelerators play a huge role, technical assistants, accountants, lawyers. We're all trying to help the SMEs really grow and fulfill potential. And so for us, very much like everyone said, it's really just giving the SMEs the confidence to approach PE firms, giving them the tools they need to approach the PE firms, saying to them that from day dot, when you start up, start building your data room, because that's what your investors are going to want to see. They're going to want to go through all of your documentation, get that all prepared, start preparing for due diligence, get familiar with deal terms, have a look at term sheets. What do you want? And don't sell yourself short. I think a lot of times, we've talked about it, the confidence issues that women face also means that when it comes to the pricing battle, they sell themselves short and, they don't go for a price that really reflects the true value of their business. So I think it's from our perspective as lawyers, it's really preparing them for all the legal work that will follow when they come in and battle with the PE houses for the best proposition for themselves.
Nothing further to add there, but we are out of time, and I must close this discussion. But I'd like to thank you all for your time. Thank you, Tanya, Abby, Anjali, and also Langa. Very insightful thoughts that you have shared for people, particularly in that space. I mean, what has come out quite prominently is the importance of being prepared for the opportunity. You never know when it might come. You never know who you may be in an elevator with. So be prepared to make a pitch at any time. And also the issue of confidence. And I suppose the issue of confidence is quite difficult for women, in the sense that, when you rejected after rejected, it is something that is easy to chip away at your confidence. But it's platforms like this, Zinati, who I believe is back in the studio. It is platforms like this that really, I think, help to build confidence with hearing everything that all the women all over the continent and all over the world are going through. I mean, it's similar challenges that we're going through, and it's platforms like this that really help you to see beyond the challenge, to know that it is possible to break down that wall or shatter that glass ceiling, as it were.
Indeed. What do they say again, Fifi? Preparedness plus opportunity equals luck. And also another thing that I noted from the conversation is that in order to drive the inclusion agenda, is that we need to start with the structures of the private equity firms themselves, so that we build policies that speak to the agenda of inclusivity and also diversity. Thank you so much, Fifi, and to the members of the final panel for today.